The train screeched as it slowed near Cedar Flats in the Wyoming territory, and Beatrix Cade pressed her gloved hand to the dirty window. Dust swirled outside in thick waves. The platform was crowded with men, dozens of them, their hats pulled low, their boots worn out, their eyes sharp and hungry with expectation. Her stomach nodded. 3 months earlier, in a small Philadelphia boarding house, she had held an advertisement printed on a tea-stained paper. It promised marriage prospects, transportation, safety, and a new future out west. She had believed it because she had nothing left to lose. Her reputation had collapsed under lies she could not defend. At 20 years old, she had learned how fast a woman could be ruined. Inside the train car were 9 women in total. Millicent Vale sat opposite her, eyes swollen from crying. Zinnia Pritchard clutched her carpet bag with white knuckles. None of them spoke. Fear held all their words trapped inside. A conductor appeared at the doorway and forced a polite smile. "Ladies, gather your things. The town council is waiting." Beatrix stood. She smoothed her travel-worn gray dress, once elegant, now heavy as grief. When they stepped onto the platform, the sun beat down with a heat she had never known in the east. The air smelled of creosote and manure. Sweat gathered at her collar after only a few steps. The men surged closer. "Look at the one in blue." "I'll take the blonde." $20 says she's mine. "Tall one's mine. I called it." Beatrice's face burned. The advertisement had mentioned introductions, gentlemen suitors, a chance to choose. This was not that. A man in a black suit climbed onto a wooden crate at the center of the platform. A brass mayor's badge gleamed on his chest. "Welcome to Cedar Flats," he called, raising his hands for silence. "These brave ladies have answered our call. Our town has grown, but we lack the civilizing influence of women." Beatrix's hands trembled.
The platform creaked beneath her shoes.
"We considered many methods of introduction," the mayor continued, smiling wider.
"But we chose the fairest and most democratic way, a lottery. Each bachelor has a number. Each lady will be assigned to one by drawing." The crowd erupted in cheers. Beatrice's breath caught. A lottery. They were not being introduced. They were being assigned, like livestock. Names were drawn. Coralie Lockage was paired with a bearded man missing 2 teeth. Millicent Vale walked forward pale as a ghost and was matched with Clarence Stratton, whose nervous smile looked as forced as her own. Women were paired off one by one. Some men looked decent, some looked violent. Most looked desperate. Then the mayor reached into the hat again. Miss Beatrix Cade, everything around her softened and blurred. Still, her legs carried her forward. The sun glared off the mayor's badge. The world tilted like a wagon on a rut. "Number 8, he called, Mr. Pete's Alton Merryweather. The crowd parted. A tall man stepped through the dust, broad shoulders, dark hair curling near his collar. His face was all angles, carved by wind and sun. His shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, showing strong arms and hands covered in scars and calluses. His gray eyes were sharp, steady, and cold. He stepped onto the platform with long, confident strides. Beatrix felt her chest tighten. This man did not look cruel, but he looked like someone who got what he wanted. He removed his hat. "Miss Cade." His voice was low and slow, like a man who spoke only when necessary. She could not form a reply. He extended his hand. His palm was rough, the grip of a man who worked the land every day. When she placed her hand into his, she felt the strength in him. The finality, the ownership. "Welcome to Cedar Flats." "Mrs. Tebb Merryweather," he said. The crowd roared. Hats flew into the air. Laughter echoed off the wooden buildings. Her name had changed before she'd spoken a single word. Alton released her hand and stepped back, putting his hat on again. "I have a wagon waiting," he said. "We leave in 5 minutes. Collect your belongings." Beatrix swallowed the rising panic. "May I say goodbye to the other ladies?" she whispered. "You have 5 minutes." He walked away. Her throat tightened. Millicent appeared beside her and pulled her into an embrace. "I am so sorry." she said, voice trembling. We all are. Zinnia reached for her hand. Maybe you will be kind. They all knew the truth. They were being claimed by men who needed wives, not women they had chosen. 5 minutes passed like 5 seconds. Beatrix climbed into Alton's wagon with shaking hands. He loaded her trunk and carpet bag without a word. The wagon wheels groaned as they left Cedar Flats behind, the town shrinking into nothing as the prairie opened wide in front of them. They rode in silence. The land stretched forever, miles of empty grass bending in the wind. No shade, no hills, no life but scattered cattle. Alton finally spoke. The ranch is 3 hours north. We run cattle, 200 head. Cabin is small but sound. Cooking, cleaning, mending. I don't tolerate laziness. She stared straight ahead. He glanced at her. You might say something. What would you have me say? She replied, bitterness rising. Thank you for winning me in a lottery. How lucky I am. His jaw tightened. I didn't design the system. I only followed it. Miss Merryweather, she corrected sharply. Is that not what you called me? The marriage will be filed with the county clerk next week, he said. The circuit preacher comes in 2 months. We'll formalize it then. How romantic. He fell silent. Hours later, when the cabin finally appeared, Beatrix felt her breath collapse inside her chest. It was small, rough, and lonely, built of weather-worn logs with a dirt floor and mismatched chairs. A rope bed sat in the corner beneath a fading quilt. He set her trunk down. You can unpack later, he said. Supper is at sundown. Supplies are inside. You can manage something. Then he walked away, leaving her alone in the dim light. Beatrix Cade stood in the cabin that was now her home, surrounded by dust and silence, claimed by a stranger she had not chosen, with no family, no way back, and no escape. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she broke. She cried until her breath shook, and the prairie wind carried away the sound. The first week on Alton Merryweather's ranch passed in a blur of fear, exhaustion, and quiet misery. Beatrix woke before dawn because Alton woke before dawn. His steps across the dirt floor were loud enough to shake her from sleep. He dressed in silence every morning, pulled on his boots, tied his bandana, and walked out without a single word. The cabin felt colder after he left. Beatrix learned quickly how different this life was from anything she had known in Philadelphia. Water came from a well, not a tap. Fire had to be coaxed from dying embers each morning. Food did not wait on shelves. Every small task required effort: hauling, heating, scrubbing, carrying. Her hands blistered within days. She burned her palm the first morning trying to stir the fire, and the blister throbbed for days. When Alton finally noticed, he only said, "You should be more careful," in that quiet, even voice that never revealed what he felt. The cooking was even harder. The fireplace smoked if the wind changed direction. The beans burned easily, the pork grew salty fast, and the biscuits were first too heavy, then too hard, then too pale. Alton ate every meal without one complaint and without one word of praise. He simply rose from the table and went back to work. She washed dishes in cold well water that numbed her fingers. She carried buckets until her arms ached. She swept the dirt floor until dust rose in clouds. Every night the fatigue felt heavier on her back, but the worst part was the silence. Alton rarely spoke unless he needed to. He finished his supper, cleaned his plate with a bit of bread, nodded once, and returned outside. She did not know where he slept until she realized he was laying a blanket on the floor each night instead of joining her in the rope bed. She did not know whether to feel relieved or insulted. On the 8th day, she was washing clothes at the creek when she suddenly sensed someone behind her. She jumped so hard she dropped Alton's shirt in the water. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I did not mean to scare you." She wrung the shirt harder than she needed to. "You did not scare me. I just did not expect you. I forget you are not used to someone else moving around nearby. I should make more noise." He shifted, looking awkward in a way she had not seen before. Beatrix studied him. His shirt was dusty, his sleeves were rolled, his throat glistened with sweat. He looked tired. Human. Not just the stone-faced cowboy she had been living beside. She spoke without planning to. "Why do you sleep on the floor?" His whole body tightened. "I thought you would prefer it. I would prefer to know what my husband expects of me." "I am not your husband yet," he said. "Not truly." "The mayor called me Mrs. Merryweather." "The mayor says many things. It doesn't make them true." Beatrix stared back toward the cabin. "You paid for me. Or rather, your number was drawn for me." "Either way, I am here." His jaw flexed. "I didn't send for a bride," he said slowly. "I sent for a wife. It's not the same. What difference does it make? I will not force myself on someone who doesn't want me." The honesty in his voice startled her. Beatrix had no answer. None that she was ready to give. Alton finally nodded once and stepped back. "We will continue as we have been. You in the bed. I'll stay on the floor." He left before she could respond. That night she lay awake long after the fire had dimmed, listening to his breathing from the opposite side of the cabin. She did not understand him. She wasn't sure she understood herself either. The second week brought rain. A storm rolled in from the north and beat the prairie without mercy. Water leaked through 3 places in the roof. Beatrix scrambled to place pots beneath each stream. Alton returned soaked from the pasture, mud on his boots and exhaustion on his face. He said he had lost a calf. He sat at the table drenched, shaking from cold, but still ate every bite of her biscuits, even though they were uneven, some burned, some pale. Only after he finished did he say, "You made good biscuits." The simple words nearly brought her to tears. The storm pounded the cabin for 3 long days. On the 3rd night, Alton came in staggering, chilled to the bone. Beatrix had never cared for anyone sick, but instinct took hold. She heated broth. She helped him out of his wet clothes, wrapped him in a blanket, and kept the fire high. He muttered once, "You are worse than the storm." But his voice softened when he said it. She did not sleep that night. She checked his forehead again and again. By sunrise, the fever broke. When he woke, he stared at her for a long moment. "You did not have to," he whispered. "Yes," she said softly. "I did. Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do." He nodded once. "Thank you, Beatrix." Her name in his voice sounded different, warmer, real. Something shifted after that night. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't simple. But something changed. They spoke more. Small conversations. Quiet ones. Not about feelings, but about work. Firewood. Fences. Chickens. Weather. But the tone changed. Less sharp. Less cold. Beatrix made the cabin more of a home. She washed the window. She planted herbs. She mended curtains. She scrubbed the floor. She placed small wildflowers in a jar on the table. Alton noticed. He didn't say a word about it, but she saw the flicker in his eyes each time he entered the cabin. One evening, she found him fixing the leaky roof before she asked. Another morning, he brought extra firewood without telling her. She set aside the best part of the chicken for him, but he placed it on her plate instead. They still slept apart, but the space between them no longer felt impossible. It felt like a bridge waiting to be crossed. And then came the night that changed everything. Alton returned from town with a bottle of whiskey, an unusual sight. He set it on the table with a quiet smile. "A good cattle sale," he said. "We can rest easier this winter." Beatrix poured 2 tin cups. They toasted to survival. The whiskey warmed her chest and loosened the stiff corners of her mind. Conversation came easier than it ever had. She told him about Philadelphia, the lies, the ruin, the hopelessness. He listened with a face carved from sympathy he did not know how to show. He told her about his mother, his father's accident, the years of building the ranch alone, the loneliness. The fire glowed warmer. The silence grew softer. Their eyes lingered longer. She felt something in her chest shift again, deeper this time. She reached across the table and placed her hand on his. His breath caught. "You don't have to sleep on the floor," she whispered. He stood slowly, voice low and unsteady. "Tell me, if I go too fast." Her heart hammered. "You won't." What happened next was not rushed or wild. It was slow and full of fear and hope and tenderness. Two lonely souls finding warmth in a place made of cold wind and hard ground. They held each other gently, learning each other's hesitations, fears, and hopes. Nothing about it was perfect, but it was human, and it was theirs. When dawn touched the cabin walls, Beatrix realized that for the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she did not feel alone. Winter arrived with sharp winds and white skies. Snow covered the prairie until it swallowed every path and landmark. Beatrix soon learned what true isolation felt like. Some days Alton could not even leave the cabin. They lived side by side in that small room, discovering both the sweetness and the difficulty of their new closeness. Alton spoke little as always, but now his silences felt different. Not cold, not distant, just a man learning how to share space with someone he cared about. Beatrix learned his habits. He lined his boots exactly beside the door every night. He checked the latch 3 times before bed. He hummed a strange melody when he shaved, and it drove her to the edge of irritation. "That is not a song," she muttered one morning while he stood in his undershirt, soap on his jaw. "It is Buffalo Gals," he said. "It is absolutely not," he grinned, the rare smile that made his whole face soften. "It is in my head." She threw a towel at him. He ducked, laughing. There were tender moments, evenings spent reading aloud from a worn copy of Whitman, checkers played with dried beans and buttons. She discovered he was a terrible loser. He claimed she cheated every time she won, even though she played with the same quiet focus every round. "Just a game," she reminded him. "You moved that button." "I did no such thing. You're ruthless." "And you are dramatic." Life settled into this mix of work, laughter, quiet, and learning each other's ways. Then her monthly cycle stopped. Beatrix froze when she realized it. Hope and fear tangled in her chest. At breakfast, she told Alton. His tin cup rattled in his trembling hands. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes." He stood from the table so fast his chair scraped the floor, walked around it, and wrapped her in his arms. "A child," he whispered. "Our child." Beatrice clung to him. "I am frightened." "So am I," he admitted. "But we will manage." And they planned for everything. He would build a cradle. She would sew blankets. They would add a small room onto the cabin. Their days glowed with new purpose. But spring brought heartbreak. She lost the baby in May. Alton held her while she wept. He offered no useless promises, only steady arms and a silent strength that kept her from breaking. They tried again. Beatrix miscarried a second time in October, and again in January during a blizzard so fierce that Dr. Whitcomb had to fight through the storm to reach them. This loss nearly took her life. Alton stayed at her bedside for days, refusing sleep, refusing to move, watching her breathe. When she finally opened her eyes, his were full of fear. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. She placed her trembling hand over his. "I am still here." A week later, Whitcomb returned and asked what herbs she'd been drinking. Beatrix listed them. When she mentioned the tea blend a woman in town had given her, something changed in his face. "Did she name the herbs?" he asked sharply. "No." His voice hardened. "Some women use dangerous plants thinking they help. They do not. They end pregnancies." Beatrix felt the world tilt. The doctor made her promise to avoid all herbs except what he approved. She agreed, numb and grieving. Healing took time. Alton grew quiet again, working long hours. Beatrix kept to the cabin, trying to stitch her heart back together one breath at a time. Still, small moments pulled them back to each other. Shared meals, a hand held longer than expected, a whispered apology in the dark, and slowly their bond grew stronger than the grief. One evening in late May, Alton stood on the porch he had built and cleared his throat. "Bricks," he said, voice low. "I've been thinking," she smiled. dangerous thing for you." He ignored her teasing and knelt in the dirt, hat in hand. "We were married by chance," he said. "By a number pulled from a hat. I want to marry you properly. Because I choose you. Because I love you." Beatrix covered her mouth with shaking hands. "Alton, will you marry me for real this time?"
"Yes," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks.
"Yes, I will." They married in Cedar Flats 3 weeks later, with the town watching and cheering. Millicent cried. Thalia clapped with joy. Zenea, swollen with pregnancy, hugged Beatrix tight. Alton slipped a gold ring, his mother's, onto her finger, and when the preacher said the words, their kiss was long and full of promise. This time there was no humiliation, only love. Life blossomed after that. The railroad offered to buy part of their land for a spur line. The payment was higher than anything they expected. Alton expanded the herd. Beatrice began selling baked goods at the new station. Over time, prosperity grew around them. Then came the miracle. Beatrice became pregnant again. This time she followed every instruction Dr. Whitcomb gave. She moved slowly, rested often, avoided every harmful herb. Alton hovered over her like she was made of glass. Millicent visited constantly, bringing baby clothes she had sewn herself. And when the pains came in March during a late winter storm, Alton paced the barn like a man on trial. Clarence stayed with him, keeping him from bursting into the cabin every time Beatrix cried out. After 18 painful hours, the doctor's wife stepped outside with a tired smile. "You have a daughter," Alton ran. Beatrix lay in the bed, sweaty and exhausted, holding a squalling newborn wrapped in blankets. When he saw them, Alton's face crumpled with joy. "She is perfect," he whispered. The baby wailed. "She has your scowl," Beatrix said. "She does not scowl. She is an angel." They named her Rose. Life transformed. A real house replaced the cabin, bigger, brighter, filled with laughter. A second daughter, Clara, arrived 2 years later. Rose grew serious and curious. Clara was sunshine and giggles. The ranch thrived. Beatrix's baking business flourished. Their home became a place of warmth and welcome. One summer evening, they sat on the porch while the girls chased fireflies across the yard. The sky was streaked with gold and purple. Rose caught a firefly in her hands. "Are fireflies falling stars?" she asked. Clara nodded. "Yes, they glow." "Stars glow too," Rose argued. "But stars are far away." Beatrix pulled both daughters close. "Maybe," she said softly, "some stars get tired of being lonely and come down to visit us for a while." "That is not science," Rose said, but she leaned against her mother anyway. Alton smiled. "It is poetry. Your mother taught me that." Beatrix rested her head on his shoulder. The porch, the land, the house, the life they built stretched before them. "Do you regret anything?" Alton asked quietly. She looked at him, at their daughters laughing in the firefly light. "I regret the lottery," she said, "but I do not regret you or us." Alton took her hand and squeezed it, thumb brushing over the ring he'd placed there. "Tell me if I go too fast," he whispered the same words he had spoken years ago, the night their lives changed forever. She smiled softly. "You are exactly fast enough." And as the sun slipped below the prairie horizon, their daughter's laughter filling the warm summer air, Beatrix knew she had finally found her home, not by chance, not by lottery, but by love they had built with their own hands.